Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's Bizz Summit session. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you to take you through an introduction to machine learning. Okay, so let's just go ahead and start our presentation. So my name is Leon Gordon. I'm a current partner at Pomerol Partners, so please do feel free to reach out and follow me on LinkedIn. I'm also a Microsoft MVP, the data platform, Forbes Technology Council member, and Brains Magazine executive contributor. Okay. So what will we cover in today's session? Well, first and foremost, we will take a look at what is machine learning, often referred to as ML. How can we benefit from machine learning within Power BI? How to create a machine learning model in Power BI Premium or Premium per user, often referred to as PPU, and how to create a machine learning model in Power BI for free. I'll also then give you some resources to continue learning. So before we begin today's session, it's worthwhile noting that we will have to get through today's session at pace. It will be very demo heavy, and we will have to gloss over some of the more technical aspects due to some time limitations. Okay, so first and foremost, what is machine learning? Well, machine learning is a branch of artificial intelligence, often referred to as AI, that teaches computers to do what comes naturally to humans and animals, which is to learn from experience. Machine learning algorithms use computational methods to learn information directly from data without relying on a predetermined equation as a model. So what we're trying to do here is to make the computer learn from experience and learn information directly from data. Okay. So how can we benefit from machine learning within Power BI? Well, we can look to do some real-time predictions. We can look at customer churn analysis, customer leads and conversions, and we can also look to identify and predict fraud. In today's session, we're going to focus on the second, which is customer leads and conversion. And to do so, we're going to have a theoretical organization. Now, this theoretical sales organization has a business problem, okay? They're spending a large amount of money, so £3 million per year, on purchasing lead data. Those leads are then going through the sales funnel, through a sales call, a follow-up call, a conversion, and ultimately, hopefully, ending in a sale. Now, the conversion rate of these sales is very low, at 4.3% conversion rate. So the problem we have here is that our organization is spending a large amount of money on purchasing leads, and is only converting a very small percentage of those leads. So wouldn't it be great if we could identify leads that are likely to convert for us, equaling us spending less money in leads and only purchasing those leads that will convert? And ultimately, this should have an upwards effect on our conversion rate as well, because we should be calling on leads that are actively going to convert for us. And we're going to address that problem using machine learning. So how can we use machine learning within Power BI? And we're just going to go into our demo session by making the machines learn. But do not worry, even though this robot does look very tired and bored, no machines were harmed in the making of this webinar. So let's go ahead and jump over and take a look at our fictional organization's data. We don't want to see myself, we want to go into our GitHub repo. Okay, so within the GitHub repo, we have access to two CSV files. Okay, one is a prospective buyer CSV, which is our lead data, and we also have our sales training CSV. I'll just go ahead and open those up in new tabs, and we'll take a little look at what that data set looks like. Okay. So first and foremost, we have our prospective buyer CSV. As I mentioned, this is our lead data, so the data that we're purchasing with our £3 million worth of spend. We can see that this comes from a transactional system because we have a prospective buyer key and an alternate key. And then we have some key customer or lead attributes like a first name, a last name, an age, a marital status, a gender, the yearly income of this individual, the total amount of children of this individual, the number of children at home, their education, occupation, whether or not they're a house owner or not, the number of cars they own, the city they live in, the state province code, and ultimately the postal code as well for these leads. Now, we also have our sales training data set. Okay. Now, this is historic customers that have already either purchased or not purchased with us. And this is what we're going to use to train our machine learning model. Now, you'll notice as we take a look at the data set, we have very common attributes between the data sets, including age, marital status, gender, yearly income, total children, so on and so forth. But ultimately, we have a very key column for us here, which is our buyer outcome. Now, this is a Boolean value that represents whether or not this individual was a buyer or not for us. So with that being said, we've explored our data. Now let's go ahead and build out our machine learning model within Power BI Premium per user. So I'm just going to head over to our Power BI service and open up a sandbox workspace that I've previously created. And as I mentioned, this is created based on Premium per user. Now, what we want to do is get that data into a data flow for us. So to do so, we go ahead and select New. We then select Data Flow. As the data mart functionality is new and in preview, Power BI prompts us if we would like to create a data mart instead. But for the purposes of this demonstration, we want to stick with a data flow. So let's select No. Okay. And then we're going to identify what we would like to create within our data flow. Now, for the purposes of this, we would like to define a new table. So we're going to choose a data source to define the tables for our data flow by adding new tables. We'll then be presented with Power Query Online, which gives us a lot of data connectors to choose from to identify our data source. Now, in this particular instance, we would like to use a text or CSV file, and we're going to enter the file path or URL. So let's go back over to our data sets, and let's start with our sales training data. Now, to get the URL for this data set, we need to go to the raw version of this file. Okay, by selecting raw here. This will then generate the raw version of the underlying data and the URL that we can pull that directly from. So we're just going to copy that, go ahead and paste that into our file path or URL and select Next. Okay. Now, Power Query will go ahead and parse that data, identifying and previewing the first 200 rows of that data set. And just whilst it does that in the background, we're going to go ahead and also get the raw version for our respective buyer CSV and add that to our clipboard by copying that line there. Okay, so Power BI, as I mentioned, Power Query Online has gone ahead and parsed that data and presented us back a preview of the first 200 rows of that data set. We can see here that it's correctly identified that our first row of this data set are headers, and it's also started to put together the data types as we can see in the top left hand of the columns here. So we don't need to do any transformations. We can go ahead and select Transform Data and ultimately save and close this table. Okay. Now, Power Query, as I mentioned, will just go ahead and parse that data and ask us to now save our data flow. So let's go ahead and call this ML Bizz Summit and go ahead and select Save. We'll then be prompted to see if we would like to either set a refresh schedule or ultimately refresh our data flow now. For the purposes of this demonstration, we don't want to do either, so we can go ahead and select the X in the corner. Now you'll notice we now have our sales training table available to us within this data flow. So let's go ahead and now add our lead data by selecting Add Tables in the top right hand side. And we're going to follow exactly the same process, but now for our lead data set. So first and foremost, let's go ahead and select Text CSV as our data source type. We're going to paste in our file path URL that we previously copied from the GitHub raw version of the CSV. We're going to go ahead and select Next. Okay. And once again, Power Query Online will just go ahead and pass that data in the background and preview us the first 200 rows of that data set. Okay. Again, in this scenario, Power Query has correctly identified that our first row of this data set is indeed headers, and also started to define some of those data types. So we can go ahead and select Transform Data and ultimately save and close this table, as we don't need to make any further transformations. Okay. Once again, we'll be asked if we would like to refresh the data set, sorry, the data flow, and we want to select No for the purposes of this. Fantastic. In a couple of short steps, we have now got our sales training data and our prospective buyer, so our lead information, into our data flow, which is great. But now we want to start to build out our first machine learning model. So to do so, we can just click on this icon within the ribbon here, which will take us through a UI-based wizard on how we're going to build our machine learning model. So first and foremost, we're going to create and train our model by looking to select training data, choose a model type, then ultimately train our model. Following on from that, we're going to look to improve our model. So we do this by iterating and retraining. And then ultimately, we're going to apply those machine learning model-based predictions to our lead data to be able to identify which of those leads is going to be likely to convert for us. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so first and foremost, within this UI-based wizard, we want to select our column to predict. So identifying what we would like to predict. And in this instance, we're going to go ahead first and foremost and choose a table. Okay. Now, as we know, we want to use our training data. So we want to use our sales training table. Okay. The outcome column that we're interested in is whether or not an individual will become a buyer or not. So we select our buyer column and we can go ahead and select next. Okay. Once again, Power BI in the background will go ahead and pass that underlying data set and identify and recommending a prediction model for us. Okay, this model learns from our data whether to predict an outcome or not. So in this instance, Power BI has correctly selected or recommended the right model. If it hadn't, we can go ahead and select here to select a different model. Now we're presented with different types of classification models, a binary prediction model, and a general classification model. And we're also presented with a regression model. Okay, so as we mentioned previously, Power BI has recommended us to use a binary prediction model. So this is to predict whether or not an outcome will be achieved, and this is generally used for determining the likelihood of a sales lead converting or the probability of a customer responding to a marketing campaign. So in this example, Power BI has actually selected the right model. If it hadn't, we could look at general classification, which is distinguishing between 3 or more outcomes. And this is generally used for credit card applicants and grouping them into those that have good credit, bad credit, and those that may require further analysis. Finally, we also have regression, which is estimating a numeric value and is generally used for house pricing predictions based on regional factors. As we said, binary prediction is our correct model, so we can go ahead and reselect that. What we want to do is choose our target outcome. Now, our target outcome is whether a buyer is true, which is by selecting the 1 flag. Now, if we get a match on this label, we want to change this label to be a buyer. And if we don't get a match, we want to change this to not buyer. We can go ahead, select next. And again, in the background, Power BI is going to pass the information that's been presented to it and start to identify which data it would like to study from that data set. Okay. So as you can see here, based on a sample of our data, Power BI has selected columns that may produce more accurate outcomes. Okay. Now you'll notice here below that some of the columns here haven't been selected because they have a low correlation with the outcome of a buyer. So for the purposes of this, I'm going to actually select some of these columns that Power BI hasn't recommended, just so I can show you why they don't correlate as we move forward. Okay. So with that being said, and it's worthwhile noting at this point that whilst these are columns of data from within our table, they're generally referred to as features within machine learning and machine learning models. So once we've selected our features that we want to use for our prediction, we can go ahead and select next. Now, Power BI will ask us to give our model a name, and again, I'm just going to go for ML this summit for this, and then ask us to give a description. Now, when you're working with machine learning models, I would always recommend giving a description so you can help others when they are using your machine learning model in the future. So I'm just going to say ML this summit description goes here, but obviously put some more information into this when you're doing this in production. Okay, so the training time. Now, I don't know about yourself, but whenever I train for something, the longer I train, generally, the better I get at it. And it's the same for our machine learning model. Okay, the longer that we train our model, the more accurate the results will be. But in this instance, we can train for up to 360 minutes and as low as 5 minutes. Okay. So for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to set this down to 5 minutes so that this isn't running in the background for a prolonged period of time. And we can see what will happen next. Okay. So when Power BI creates this machine learning model, it will actually just use 80% of the underlying data to run its predictions and train the model against. It will then use the following 20% of the remaining data to then iterate and test those predictions. Okay. So let's go ahead and select Save and Train. And what you'll notice at that point is that our new data flow has been created, ML Bizz Summit, and we're now refreshing our data flow in the same way that we would be refreshing a Power BI data set or data mart. Okay, so that will go ahead and train in the background. Whilst it does that, we won't wait. We'll pick this up from a previously deployed version of a machine learning model so that we can show you what the output would look like after we've successfully trained. Okay. So once you've successfully trained your model, okay, you'll be presented with a report of the underlying training of that model. Okay. So you go generally into your report, and this is going to be a Power BI report within the service that will allow us to understand in a bit more detail how that machine learning model was created. Okay. There are multiple pages to this report, and I'm just going to gloss over some of the key aspects, and starting on the first page here, which is model performance. Okay. First and foremost, we're told how our model performed based on the area under the curve, which is the AUC. Okay. Again, won't go into too many aspects in terms of the technical details of AUC, but generally the higher the percentage, anything above 70% is seen as good. Okay. Now, we then look to see what our top predictors are. Okay, so this is the different features that we identified earlier that have a varying influence on the predicted outcome. So by selecting this button here, I can go into a bit more detail in terms of why Power BI didn't recommend all of the features to us. And we can quite clearly see that age, marital status, total children, and to a certain extent postcode are key features that have a correlation with buyer. And as we progress down this chart, we can also see that Power BI was actually quite accurate in not recommending us to use any of these additional features. Now, by selecting on age, we can start to see a breakdown of what a typical buyer looks like for our organization. We can see they're generally 46 years and below, or between 46 to 59 years. Generally, their marital status is single. Okay. The total children that they have at home is 1. Okay. And now we're starting to get and identify what a buyer looks like for our organization. Okay. We then have something presented to us here, which is a confusion matrix. Now, again, very much going to gloss over the technical aspects of this, but a good way to look at this visualization is available to us here. Okay, so we have our 4 quadrants, and what we're looking for as we're trying to predict the buyer is this top left-hand value here, which is a true positive. So this means our machine learning model accurately predicted that an individual was going to be a buyer. Ultimately, in this bottom right-hand corner, it's a true negative, which identifies that the machine learning model accurately identified that this individual would not be a buyer. Okay. So by going back to our chart, we can see in the top left-hand here, we have a relatively high value, so it's not performing too badly in terms of predicting buyers for us, and in accurately not predicting a buyer, we don't have any values at all. Now, we can change this by using something called recall, or by increasing the precision. And you'll notice that as we push this slider over to increase precision, our numbers of the prediction model will change. It's now more accurate in predicting those individuals that are not a buyer. Okay. With this being said, a good starting point generally with your model is around 0.5. Okay. And again, you can tune this as you move forward. I'm going to leave this like this for the purposes of this demonstration. Once you're happy with your precision and recall, we then go ahead and take a look at the accuracy recall. Okay. Now, again, this goes into a bit more detail, which probably is out of the scope of today's session. But ideally, what we're looking at is this visualization here. Now, we can see our teal line at the top is an ideal percentage for us, And we can see that the black dotted line here would be our model being a random guess. Now our model is the yellow line, and we can see that it quite clearly sits in the middle of what would be the ideal and what would be a random guess. So it hasn't performed too badly. Ultimately, our final tab, which is training details, goes into a bit more detail in terms of how many rows we use to train the model, how many of those were training rows, how many iterations were run within the time period, and we can see the quality of our iterations here in this visualization. And ultimately, we then get some more information around data featureization. So quite a lot of information available to us after we've ran our initial machine learning model. Again, for the purposes of this session, it's just something to be aware of as opposed to a deep dive. Okay. Once we're happy with our model, we can go ahead and select Apply Model by selecting here. And this will allow us to then go ahead and apply our model, our predictions, to our lead data. Okay. So to do this, we select our input table, so where our lead data is, and this will be our prospective buyer table. We can then name our output column. So we can select all of this and we can call this outcome. Okay. And we previously set our threshold to be 0.5. Now, if you're following along with this, then go ahead and click Save and Apply. Okay. As we've previously deployed this version in preparation for today's session, I will go ahead and select Cancel. Okay. Once you've applied your model, you'll be presented back to your tables within your data flow. Okay, and you'll now notice that we have 4 additional tables available to us. Okay, first and foremost is our training data. So this is that 80% of data that was used to train our machine learning model. We then have our testing data table, which is the remaining 20% of data that was used to test against. Now, the table that we're most interested in is our prospective buyer enriched buyer prediction. Now, this is our new lead data, which now has a prediction applied to it from our machine learning model. And ultimately, we have an explanations table which goes into a bit more detail in terms of why our machine learning model has made these predictions. So fantastic, we've now run our end-to-end machine learning model. Let's go ahead and pull this into Power BI and see our results. So let's go ahead and select a new report. And we'll be presented with the familiar Get Data splash screen that becomes available to us. And it doesn't appear that I'm signed in, so I may need to sign back in as part of this session. Let's select Get Data. And what we want to use is a data flow as our data source. So let's select Power BI data flows. Go ahead and select Connect. Now, Power BI will just try to connect us to our workspace. At this moment, if you're not signed in, it will ask you to sign into your account so you can make a connection. I am signed in, so we can go ahead and select our sandbox or workspace. We're going to go with our previously deployed version of this data flow. And as I mentioned, the table that we're interested in is our enriched buyer prediction table. Okay, let's go ahead and select transform data. Okay. And we'll now be presented with Power Query, the desktop, to see a preview of our data. Now, what you'll notice is that we have our lead data, so we can test our lead data because we have our prospective buyer key, alternate key, but we now have some additional columns available to us at the end of this table. So we have our buyer prediction outcome, which is our machine learning model prediction. We have our buyer prediction score, which is the accuracy of that prediction. And then we have some additional metadata available to us in terms of our prediction explanation and our prediction explanation index. Okay. With that being said, the 2 columns that we are most interested in, obviously, is our outcome, so our prediction, and the prediction score. So let's go ahead and close and apply that data. Now, this is a relatively small data set, so this should only take a couple of moments to pass and deploy. And then we can take a rudimentary look at how we can present this data back. Okay. Excellent. So with that being said, let's go ahead and just create a very quick data visualization. We're going to get our lead first name, we're going to get our lead last name, and we're also going to get our outcome, and we're also going to get our score, okay, just into a very simple table. So we can start to see our predictions against our leads now, and the accuracy of those predictions as well. Now let's put in place a very rudimentary filter. Okay. And now you'll notice that we can start to identify those leads which have a high likelihood of being a buyer by filtering. We can also show our accuracy score as well by sorting that data. Now, ultimately, we can also choose false here to start to weed out some of those leads that we don't think will have that we don't believe will be a buyer with us. So there you can quite clearly see a business benefit in terms of being able to then go and give this list of potential leads that will convert to our sales team to actively go and call, and ultimately to have a list of leads that we wouldn't purchase, which would save us on our lead spend. Okay. So that brings to an end our first demo in terms of how we can put together a machine learning model within Power BI. Premium or premium per user. Okay. So now what we're going to take a look at is how we can then do this in Power BI for free. So without the license fee costs of Power BI Premium or premium per user. Now it is worthwhile noting at this point that there are some limitations to this approach. So we can't use any machine learning ops, often referred to as ML ops. We only have the personal data gateway available to us. It becomes very difficult to manage dependencies, and this approach is not very scalable. Okay. So with that being said, to use this approach, we have to use some alternative tools outside of Power BI. Okay. One of those is Anaconda. Now, Anaconda is by far the easiest way to set up data science environments within your system, and it's available in a free distribution as well for an individual edition. We also are going to use a Python library known as PyCaret. Now, PyCaret is an open source, low-code machine learning library in Python that allows us to go from preparing our data to deploying our model within minutes. Okay. So to do so, let's go ahead and jump into our second demo. Now, as I mentioned, you can go ahead and download Anaconda directly from the anaconda.com website and install that within your system. Okay. Now, once you've completed the installation of Anaconda, you can go ahead and select your command prompt for Anaconda just by searching for Anaconda within your system, and we're going to go to our Anaconda prompt. Okay. Now, what you'll notice within your Anaconda prompt is that you're presented with a base environment. Now, this is your starting point, and you can think of environments as containers or folders as such that you're then going to use for your Python environments. Okay. So what we want to do is create a new environment by using activate data science underscore UG command. Okay. Now you'll notice that we switched here from our base environment to our data science underscore UG environment. Okay. So we're now within another contained environment. So what we want to do first and foremost is to install a module called pip. Now pip is basically a package manager. Okay, so this is going to allow us to install different libraries and modules within this environment. So to do this, we use the command conda install pip, hit enter. Okay. Now pip is already installed within this system, so we may be prompted for an update. But if you are following on with this, then it may take slightly longer on your system, and if you're installing for the first time. Excellent. There is an update available, but for the purposes of this demo, I'm not going to go ahead and install the update. And then finally, now we have pip installed, we can then use our pip command to install PyCaret. Now, if you remember, PyCaret is the library we're going to use to build out our machine learning model using Python for free. Again, PyCaret is already installed on this system, so you'll see that all of the requirements are already satisfied. But if you were following on for the first time, this may take some more time on your system. Okay. Now, once you've used those three commands, you now have a Python environment available to you to start to use Python within Power BI. So our next step is to make Power BI aware of this environment. Okay. So to do so, you want to go to File, you want to go into your Options and Settings. Okay. You want to select Options. And then we'll just be presented with our options screen. And in global options, we want to go ahead and select Python scripting. Now in detected home directories, you want to select other. And then you'll notice here that we're pointing to our Anaconda 3 environments, and we're looking at our data science underscore UG environment. Okay. So all you need to do is set your Python home directory to your new environment within Anaconda, and then go ahead and select OK. And this will make Power BI aware of your Python environment and give you access to the packages that you've installed within that environment, okay, which is fantastic. So then what we want to do is go ahead and start to get our data. Now, in an effort to stay on time, we are going to go through this at pace, as I mentioned, and then gloss over some of the more technical aspects as we go through this. So let's start up a new Power BI desktop file. And we're going to go ahead and load our data into this file by selecting Get Data. Now, there is going to be a couple of differences from how we did this within Power Query Online. So the first difference is, if you remember previously, we used the text or CSV data source connector. Now, within Power BI Desktop, we're actually going to use the web connector. So let's go ahead and select our web connector and select connect. Okay. Now we're going to use our previously stored URLs from our raw CSV files, and we're going to use our clipboard to get those again. And let's use our sales training CSV first and hit OK. Now again, Power BI and Power Query will go ahead and pass that data and present back to us the first 200 rows of that data. Now you'll notice that Power BI Desktop hasn't correctly identified our first rows headers and also hasn't identified our data types as well. Now, in an effort to stay on time, I'll show you briefly how you would resolve that. So you would select here, use our first row as headers, which will promote our first row headers. And ultimately, you can change some of your data types by selecting this icon in the top left here and changing the value. Now, I won't do that for all of our features here, and we're going to move on and load in our lead data by selecting New Source and selecting the Web Connector. Now, once again, we're going to use our raw URL, which we previously copied to our clipboard, and we're going to bring in our lead data. Okay. And again, in the background, Power BI will pass this data and present back to us a preview. And once again, it's incorrectly been able to identify our first row as headers. So we do have some transformations to make at this point. We will use our first row as headers, and we would then change any of our data types as needed. Now, for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to move on to a previously created version of this Power BI file and pick this up from where we would be with these two tables. Okay, so let's move on to our demo here, and let's go ahead and select Edit Query. Okay. Now, the reason I've moved on to a previously created version of this file is to save us on time of actually running through and loading this data, as it does take a little bit of time when you do it from Python. So let's first and foremost take a look at our sales training data. So you'll see that we promoted our headers here. We've changed any data types, okay? And then we've gone ahead, and as I mentioned before, we can start to use our Python scripts within this environment. So to do so, you use transform and select Run Python script. Now, when you do this, you'll be presented with a rudimentary IDE, which will enable you to either type or paste in a Python script. Now, fortunately, on our GitHub repo, we actually have all of our scripts readily available and in line for if you do want to follow this along. So the first script you would use would be impute dataset for ML. Okay. And to to use this script, we're going to open up a new window. And once again, you can go ahead and select the raw version of this script. And just copy all of this script and paste this directly into our Python script and go ahead and select OK. As I mentioned, as I previously run the script, we will select cancel. Now, you'll be presented back with all of the data frames that are created, and the one that we're interested in is df_imputed. So you can select table here to just expand, and then we'll be presented with our imputed data. Now, at a very high level, what we're doing in this script is basically mapping our values, and you can see this clearly here in our gender column. We previously had male and female. We now have two distinct values, one being 1.0 and the other being 0.0, to represent each unique value within that table to enable us to be able to run our PyCarrot script. Once we're in that position, we can go ahead and select Run Python script again, and we'll be presented with another Python script box, and we can go ahead from our GitHub and select our second script, which is to train the data set for ML. Now, this script does exactly what it says on the tin, and we are recreating the training element that we did in Power BI in the service. So we can go ahead and select and copy that script and ultimately paste it into our Run Python script and select OK. Now, once you've done that, what will happen in the background is that we will be running our Python script that will build out our machine learning model and build our predictions. Okay. So again, recreating what we did in Power BI in the service, but within Power BI desktop. Now, once this is run through, we will have our predicted values against our sales training data, and we'll be in the position to then apply these predictions to our lead data. Okay. Just whilst that runs through, we can go ahead and pick up our lead table as well from where we would have previously left off. Okay. Now, what you'll notice is we would have promoted our headers in the very same way that we did previously, and we'll be in a position to run our Python script on this data, our first Python script on our lead data. Okay. Now, the Python script we want to run by selecting Run Python script here is exactly the same as what we've done for our sales training data. We have to encode and map the data across to our new values ready for predictions. So go ahead and select our number 3 value, and we can go ahead and copy and paste this script out based on the raw elements. Okay. We go back over to Power BI desktop, paste the scripting, and then you will see we're presented with the same df_imputed table, and we can expand that table to see that we will have our values, our features mapped to those encoded values ready to be run with the PyCarrot library. Okay. We have our final script available to us at this point, which becomes, it's actually the smallest script, but arguably the most powerful as well, because this is where we actually apply our predictions to our lead data. And you'll notice again, this is 7 lines of code. As I mentioned, arguably our smallest script, but the most powerful. So let's go ahead and select the raw version of the script, copy this script back. Okay. Now you'll see that we have our imputed values, and we can go ahead and select Run Python script and paste in our final Python script before selecting OK. Now, once you have selected OK, you'll be presented with our final table, which then has our lead data available to us with our predictions applied as well. Okay. So we'll just give this a moment to run through, conscious that we're slightly getting towards time. So once we have applied our predictions, as I mentioned, we will get some new columns available to us. And as we've already run this through previously, I may be able to pick this up directly from within Power BI as opposed to waiting for this information to pass. Okay. So the process is I'm going to select close. We now have our data loaded, and let's just go back across to our Power BI demo file. So we now have our lead data available to us within Power BI Desktop, and you'll notice that we now have a label and a score within here as well. So let's go ahead and select first name, let's select last name, let's select label, which is our outcome column, our prediction, and let's select score behind that as well. Okay. So now you'll notice we have a very similar table structure to that which we applied with Power BI Premium per user. And we can also go ahead and select our rudimentary filter, and we can filter down for those leads that are likely to become buyers with us, and we can also sort this score so we can see the more accurate predictions. And we can also then filter these leads which are not going to become buyers for us as well. So very much in the same way that we did within Power BI Premium or Premium per user, we can recreate this logic within Power BI using Python. Okay. Now, in that demo, I showed you how to do this and apply it in steps using Power Query. So we could break it down and really talk you through how this would look and how the data changes as you move through this process. Now, ideally, what you should do when you're using Python scripts within Power BI is apply all of your steps directly within the Python script because it's more performant from that perspective. So just to give you a complete run through, we have a final script available to us in our GitHub, which is Python end-to-end ML. Okay, so you can go ahead and select that. And again, we can get the raw version of the script. Now, what this script is doing is all of those elements that we applied, we're doing those within the actual script as opposed to as individual steps within Power Query. Okay, so you can go ahead and copy this script. And you'll notice here that we have Python leads. So if I go into and edit this query, you'll see that within Python leads, we only have two steps. Okay, the first being our source, which we can see is just the Python script, the script you can copy and paste in here. And then finally, we have our final predictions, which is a table that we can expand to then give us our end data set. Okay, you can see it's much faster, and that we have our label, our score, and our first name and last name available to us directly. And again, just for completeness, we can then, if we delete these two tables here, we can then use our Python lead table, okay, and have our first name, our last name, ultimately our label, which is our prediction outcome, and our score available to us in exactly the same way, and our rudimentary filter to be able to select this data and sort by our score as well, true or false. Okay, excellent. So that brings to a conclusion our demo. Okay. So we now have a vision. And how can we take this to a new level? So we can use outlier detection using PyCaret, topic distribution, association rule mining, and a whole plethora of other solutions as well are now open to us. Okay. So as I mentioned, I will give you some more resources to take away. I would implore you to check out a book called Extending Power BI with Python and R from Lucas Zavarella. Also, kdnuggets.com is a fantastic website which has a lot of information based on data science. We also have towardsdatascience.com, again, a fantastic website for those of you that are interested in data science. As I mentioned before, anaconda.com is a fantastic site. You can go and get that individual distribution of Anaconda for free. And Microsoft also has some great documentation on how you can build machine learning models as well. So with that being said, I'd like to thank you all for your time and open up for any questions. Excellent.
Inventing the new world of business applications. A long time ago, in the ancient prehistoric days, the world of business applications was very different from how we know it today. To understand the great evolution of these applications, we must take a long journey, a journey back in time. Findings prove the presence of inchoate and degenerate off-the-shelf products, just as vast numbers of overcomplicated individual development. The modern developed business application was nowhere to be found. And then, out of the midst of chaos, 100% customized unique business solutions emerged that run on the robust Oriana low-code platform with no vendor deadlock. Based on a low-code foundation, by fine-tuning and snapping the application blocks together, business applications began to be built faster and at lower cost than ever before. The era of the Oriana ecosystem thus began. With a growing partner network across Europe, Oriana evolved from being a hands-on, low-code, no-code tool to an enterprise-grade platform. A community of software developer, commercial, and ISV partners are relying now on the platform to distribute and develop scalable, future-proof solutions. With the help of the continuously growing Oriana content library, customizable applications can be created according to business needs and fine-tuned with the many ready-to-use application blocks. Oriana Studio, the integrated developer tool, doesn't even require in-depth coding knowledge, still enabling rapid application building and modification for consultants and developers alike. Customized prototypes are presented as soon as the first meeting. Ask for your own. Join Oriana's unique world.
Dicen que el aleteo de las alas de una mariposa se puede sentir al otro lado del mundo. Eso significa que algo que hagamos hoy puede tener consecuencias más allá de cualquier frontera, más allá del tiempo. Las personas con enfermedades raras o sin diagnóstico somos el paradigma del efecto mariposa. Pese a que las familias estamos lejos unas de otras, los retos que nos unen pesan más que cualquier distancia. Ese primer aleteo lo marcaron las personas que se unieron y crearon la primera organización de enfermedades raras de Europa. Gracias a este primer paso, surgieron los primeros marcos legislativos de enfermedades raras. La onda de este aleteo llegó a España, motivando después el nacimiento de FEDER, la Federación Española de Enfermedades Raras. Y con ello surgieron las primeras iniciativas para dar respuesta a las familias. También llegó la primera ponencia en el Senado que instaba a crear la estrategia de enfermedades raras que llegaría en 2009. Una hoja de ruta que se publicó en paralelo a nuestro primer estudio en serio, que cuantificaba nuestros retos, diagnóstico, tratamiento y atención sociosanitaria. Los ecos volverían a resonar en Europa, con la creación de las redes europeas de referencia, siguiendo la Directiva de Asistencia Transfronteriza. Una vez habíamos sentado las bases de nuestra acción en Europa, desde nuestro país nos abrimos camino para volar, hacia Iberoamérica y todo el mundo. Por fin, ese primer aleteo, después de años, nos permitió llegar a la sede de la ONU en Nueva York. Y llegó hasta nuestros días, con la resolución de la ONU en enfermedades raras. ¿Y ahora qué? No podemos predecir el futuro, pero podemos ser ese aleteo, esa chispa que deriva en grandes cosas. ¿Os imagináis las buenas noticias que podríamos compartir en 2030?
Soñamos con un futuro en el que la inversión en investigación en enfermedades raras se multiplica. Se reduce el retraso diagnóstico a menos de un año. Existen tratamientos eficaces y seguros para la mayoría de las enfermedades raras. La experiencia clínica compartida ya es una realidad dentro y fuera de nuestras fronteras. Se consolida un modelo de atención integral, innovador, que cubre las necesidades sociosanitarias. Las personas con enfermedades raras logran un pleno desarrollo y participación social. Creemos que este futuro que imaginamos es posible.
Hola, buenos días, Enrique. Ya estoy lista. Listo, ya voy a compartir pantalla. ¿Me escuchan muy bien? Hola, ¿me pueden confirmar si me escuchan?
Hola Mayra,
Hola,
¿me
buenos días.
oyes? ¿Puedes compartir tu pantalla y empezamos? Estamos en directo, ¿vale?
Mira, ujú, compartir pantalla.
Vale, pues ya está, Mayra,
Vale.
ya estás. Adelante.
Bueno, muy buenos días para todos. Estoy eh, muy feliz de acompañarlos en esta edición. Estoy saludándolos desde Bogotá, Colombia. Espero que se estén pasando muy bien el evento. He estado muy atenta de la agenda ayer con la jornada práctica y hoy. Así que desearles solamente lo mejor a tanto a los organizadores, los demás speakers y a la audiencia que puedan aprender muchísimo de lo que Microsoft tiene todas las plataformas de Power Platform. Yo me presento, soy Mayra Vadillo, soy MVP en Business Applications, tengo ya más de 10 años trabajando con Office 365, específicamente desde el año 2010, el mismo tiempo que vengo trabajando con CRM Online y se podrán imaginar que por ese tiempo he visto nacer y evolucionar toda la plataforma de Power en Microsoft. Soy consultora, tengo más de 10.500 horas en consultoría con Microsoft y con cliente final. Pero bien, entendiendo que nuestro tiempo es muy específico, tengo 30 minutos, les preparé un tema bien particular. ¿Qué son los centros de excelencia en Microsoft y hacia dónde vamos en este enfoque de herramientas para la gobernanza? Y voy a contarles más bien de dónde viene, de dónde viene. El centro de gobernanza viene como una respuesta para complementar lo que el centro de administración que por defecto ofrece Power Platform nos brinda. Para ello, voy a mostrarles qué es lo que puede contar, con qué puede contar hoy un administrador de, de Power Platform. Y vamos a mirar qué puede contar un usuario final. Entonces, un administrador de Power Platform va a encontrar una misma consola desde la cual administrará todas las aplicaciones y todos los recursos que éstas consumen, bien sea en Power Apps, pero también en flujos de trabajo. Así que es lo mismo si escojo Power Apps o Power Automate, todos apuntan a la misma consola. Hay algo bien particular y es que la consola de Power BI, aún siendo de Power Platform, todavía no se unifica. Esa sigue siendo una consola independiente, pero Power BI no es nuestra conversación. Un administrador, entonces, con qué tiene que interactuar? Un administrador va a poder visualizar los entornos. Recordemos que los entornos son los espacios o los contenedores que podemos ir creando para separar y aislar todos los artefactos que se construyen con cada uno de los servicios de Power Platform. Esto facilita la gestión de los recursos, la gestión de los usuarios y sobre todo la administración. Los entornos siempre le van a facilitar al usuario ver, entonces, en algún momento dado, al administrador, qué contiene, qué recursos se están consumiendo y hacer sus respectivas configuraciones de administración. Listo. Vamos a cargar, por ejemplo, uno. Listo, ya detuve el OneDrive que me estaba consumiendo recursos. Y aquí, sí, el usuario podría ver, bueno, quiero ver cuántas aplicaciones tenemos, cuántos flujos de trabajos tenemos. Vamos a ver las aplicaciones existentes. Y si yo quisiera ver el rendimiento de cada aplicación, tendría que ir una a una y poder visualizar su rendimiento, sus recursos, los conectores que consumen. Veamos, por ejemplo, este de visitas a la CIS. Listo. Yo podría como administrador decir quién es el propietario, cuáles son las últimas fechas en que se modificaron, o fechas de modificación, fecha de creación, qué tipo de aplicaciones, qué conexiones está consumiendo, qué flujos tiene asociados y con qué usuarios se encuentra compartida. Bien. Piensen en un administrador haciendo esto elemento por elemento. Ok. Ahora tenemos, mediante el análisis, si sigo estando en el Admin Center, yo puedo analizar todo lo que tenga que ver, por ejemplo, con las automatizaciones. No todo el mundo está consumiendo los servicios de Dataverse, pero desde aquí yo puedo visualizar y monitorear el recurso que me está consumiendo la base de datos. En temas de automatización, solo tenemos 3 vistas. Podemos ver el uso, la actividad de los usuarios que las crean y el inventario. Un inventario de mis automatizaciones. Puedo visualizarlo por entorno. Incluso este reporte es nuevo. Estos son todos los entornos disponibles y con ello visualizar. Aquí en los entornos tenemos el alcance de aquellos que son de tipo Teams, porque es importante cuántos usuarios estarán creando flujos de aprobaciones en plantillas, creando flujos de trabajo dentro de los equipos de Teams, además de instalar la aplicación de Power Apps dentro del servicio de Teams y hacer aplicaciones para equipos específicos. Por lo tanto, hoy un equipo no solamente tiene como contenido las conversaciones, los documentos mediante los archivos, que eso igual le apunta siempre a SharePoint, donde está el OneNote también, tenemos otro tipo de contenido que se genera. ¿En dónde se guardará? No va a ser en SharePoint, en algún lugar, y ese lugar es Dataverse for Microsoft Teams. Aquí yo puedo visualizar entonces, vamos a ver, por ejemplo, este. Vamos a mirar de una vez este entorno. Puedo ver cuántas ejecuciones ha consumido y demás. Puedo visualizarlo por tipo de entorno o por la región. El inventario. El servicio no es muy rápido, entonces hay que tener un poco de paciencia. Bien. Aquí, si pueden llevarme el ritmo y pongámonos en el zapato del administrador, primero que todo, es muy uno a uno. No le brinda una vista al administrador holística. No le está brindando un estado general, pero en términos de gobierno. ¿Por qué? Porque no se está centrando en los usuarios. Está más centrado en el resultado. ¿Cuántas aplicaciones? ¿Cuántos conectores? Pero no tiene otro alcance y es estos conectores me representan a un impacto en el nivel de riesgo. Aquí, entonces, nace la necesidad de sumar y complementar a lo que tenemos en Power Platform frente al Admin Center y frente a lo que cada usuario por su cuenta podría hacer. Hay que reconocer que no todos los usuarios lo harán. Por ejemplo, que en Power Automate, si usted es dueño de un flujo de trabajo, puede medir el rendimiento de su flujo de trabajo. Aquí se le ha sumado una herramienta de monitoreo basados en el producto o complemento de Process Advisor. Esto por cada automatización. Y sí, señores, pues, particularmente, no, esto lo he notado desde ayer, viernes, que los servicios están un poco lentos para cargar. Antier había una falla en una plataforma, pero era la de la plataforma de socio de negocios. Muy listo. Aquí yo pudiera decirles, vamos a mirar qué flujos de trabajo tengo y por los flujos de trabajo monitorear. No todos los usuarios entenderán cómo hacerlo. No todos los usuarios tendrán la habilidad de leer los resultados y de interpretar el informe que él genera. Vamos a utilizar, por ejemplo, voy a cambiar de entorno un momento. ¿Listo? Desde aquí, un usuario puede visualizar entonces todos los elementos que tiene activado. Voy a tomar uno al azar. Pero esos son programados, no todos me los van a monitorear si son programados. Voy a mirar este. Cada flujo de trabajo, bien como les vengo diciendo, me permite aquí visualizar el proceso y cómo lo puedo mejorar. Información de procesos. Listo. Y desde aquí, el usuario podría entonces generar todo el análisis de un flujo en particular. Mientras él procesa, yo puedo analizar el detalle del flujo, compartir los resultados hacia mis compañeros y demás. Sin embargo, Microsoft, ¿de qué se dio cuenta? Se dio cuenta, primero que todo, que me está diciendo en promedio cuánto dura mi flujo de trabajo en ejecutarse y cómo lo podría mejorar. ¿Qué pasa con esto? Microsoft reconoció que quedaban unos vacíos de administración. Voy a mostrarles, entonces, hemos visto lo que tiene disponible un administrador de Power Platform, hemos visto lo que tiene disponible un usuario, pero reconociendo, como les decía, que no todos los usuarios o lo van a aprovechar o van a tener la habilidad de interpretar el resultado. Para ello, Microsoft nos trae lo siguiente. Nos ofrece unos centros de excelencia que le va a brindar a la administración de la organización una vista detallada, profunda, holística de todo el ecosistema que los usuarios vienen desarrollando para aplicaciones, los conectores que están consumiendo, los flujos de trabajo, los bots, las páginas, cada elemento hecho con cualquiera de los productos de Power Platform. Aquí vamos a ubicar la aplicación. Aplicaciones. Y por aquí lo tengo. Eso es una aplicación basada en modelos que tiene además un conjunto de más aplicaciones para que los usuarios puedan llevar un proceso de entrenamiento, donde yo pueda planificar tren de trainers para mis usuarios, donde yo pueda llevar un backlog de las ideas de los proyectos que se formulen y así poder dar una gobernanza a lo que se hace con los productos de Power Platform. Esta, compárenla con lo que mostré al inicio, que le facilita al administrador. Tiene un overview de todo lo que tenemos en cuanto a los usuarios activos que están construyendo cualquier elemento de Power Platform, los entornos que se encuentran activos y por cada entorno un resumen de su total de aplicaciones y su total de flujos de trabajo. Por flujos, aquí claramente se iría mezclando los de RPA, los de nube, los de escritorio. Y por aplicaciones se estarían mezclando las de lienzo, las de modelos y las de portales. Aquí podríamos ver cuáles son los usuarios también activos, no solamente a nivel de aplicaciones, sino a nivel de flujos. Luego, me consolide dos vistas a nivel de lista en términos de aplicaciones y flujos por cada usuario. Vamos a mirar cualquiera. Un requerimiento al MOB. Esto fue algo que hice para un cliente en Costa Rica. Aquí me trae una hoja de resumen y voy a poder visualizar entonces todas las conexiones que realmente tiene invocado o al que hace referencia. Entonces tengo uno de aprobación, un conector que me consume Outlook, el servicio de usuarios, el directorio de usuarios y servicio de SharePoint. Me está indicando la fecha en que se modifica, en que se crea, el estado, ese está suspendido, pero lo que más me interesa es que tiene un proceso de auditoría donde me indica si impacta el negocio, si hay una justificación para que se use en el negocio, si tengo un requerimiento de dependencia hacia otros conectores, si tiene un impacto en el riesgo de seguridad y si tiene un requerimiento de revisión por parte del administrador o no. Noten por favor aquí en la parte superior, esto es un Business Process Flow, por lo que esto es una aplicación basada en modelos. ¿Qué significa? Que él no contento con solamente recolectar la información y llevarme un detalle más profundo de lo que está asociado a ese elemento, yo lo puedo someter a unos procesos internos basados en un conjunto de etapas para que ese flujo o esa aplicación o ese elemento siga en producción o no. Resulta que se ha vuelto un problema y el término problema no siempre se refiere a algo negativo. Un problema puede ser una situación desafiante o un reto para evitar una situación de caos y mantener un control. Entonces tenemos un problema y es que no siempre tenemos una visibilidad como administradores de la cantidad de elementos que hacen nuestros usuarios. Desconocemos lo que la gente construye y generalmente se enteran cuando hay un problema, porque el usuario que creó se fue de la organización y por lo tanto se detuvieron los conectores. Porque por un proceso aislado como cambio de contraseña, llegó de vacaciones o no, pero el cambio de contraseña ocasionó que detuvieran los conectores. O porque quizás haciendo una labor el administrador de configurar DLPs para los conectores, que ya tenemos más de 830 conectores. Si se crea una directiva y se clasifica alguno como bloqueado, por ejemplo, o que son datos del negocio, con seguridad, si ya habían flujos consumiendo estos conectores o aplicaciones, inmediatamente se desactivan. Ahí es cuando los usuarios de una vez reaccionan y es donde descubrimos que algunas personas ya venían construyendo elementos. Y a veces cuando los construyen, no lo hacen con la mejor práctica en cuanto a, en lugar de usar su propia identidad de cuenta de usuario, deberían haber usado una cuenta de servicios. Entonces, esta herramienta nos va a permitir como administradores tener una mejor auditoría, tenemos logs de auditoría, tenemos un análisis de los usuarios a nivel de los que hacen y los que consumen. Yo estoy atendiendo como consultora, yo soy freelance, no, o sea, no soy full time para Microsoft, aunque tengo una relación con ellos de como SWAT desde el año 2013, atiendo sus clientes, pero no soy legalmente full time, cosa que me encanta porque puedo moverme con cliente final y socios de negocio. Y tengo un cliente que es una empresa de energía en Centroamérica, donde tenían un problema de gobierno. Así que llegué, les dije hay que ordenar, implementamos estas consolas de administración y de allí hemos podido identificar, descubriendo más usuarios que estaban haciendo aplicaciones, más usuarios haciendo flujos de trabajo, muchísimos usuarios experimentando con aplicaciones de tipo modelos, muchísimos usuarios experimentando con Dataverse. Y cuando yo hablo de experimentar, es cuando usted hace algo por curiosidad y lo deja ahí, pero ese ahí sigue consumiendo recursos. Y lo que estamos haciendo ahorita es un plan de mejora donde la consola me identifica las aplicaciones que ya no se usan y dar una acción como eliminar o migrar. Y a las que tienen mucho uso, se están analizando para llevarlas a una mejor versión, porque todas son aplicaciones de lienzo y vamos a llevar unas hacia modelos. Así que el centro de excelencia, como resultado, nos entrega, uno, una gran consola de administración, que es la que les estoy mostrando, y por otro lado nos entrega un reporte en Power BI. El centro de excelencia también viene para la versión en Teams. Y con ello tener una vista dedicada, ojo, dedicada, no quiero decir que no se pueda ver con la que les acabo de mostrar, una vista dedicada desde el cliente de Teams para un administrador. Ahora, con esta preocupación, Microsoft no se queda quieto. ¿Y qué hizo? Para las organizaciones que ya están haciendo procesos más robustos, pero con automatizaciones complejas basados en inteligencia artificial y RPA, descubrió la oportunidad y la trabajó, claro está, en construir un nuevo centro de excelencia, pero para la automatización. Aquí yo voy a poder visualizar entonces todo lo que tenga que ver con mi flujo de trabajo, pero aunque esta herramienta del centro de excelencia, eh, el COE, que es la primera que tenemos y incluso recientemente salió una nueva versión, mes a mes se está actualizando. ¿Qué hacemos nosotros? Los volvemos a hacer un proceso de actualización. Aunque en comparación con el Power Platform Admin Center nos da una información muy amplia, muy detallada, necesitamos una enfocada hacia la automatización. Con ello, les voy a dar un resumen para ir cerrando la presentación. Aquí. El centro de excelencia está enfocado entonces a un conjunto de aplicaciones, pero todas conjugan en la que les visualicé de administración para darnos todo el catálogo de las aplicaciones que han sido construidas por los usuarios, pero también nos suma una aplicación para administrar las directivas de prevención de pérdida de datos, las DLPs, para construir y organizar un catálogo interno de aplicaciones y que las personas puedan ver por autoservicio lo que existe y no simplemente depender de que el propietario nos la comparta, donde podamos tener un conjunto de servicios eh, para configuración de los permisos a nivel de aplicaciones y de flujos de trabajo. Y por tanto, como les mostré ahorita, la aplicación de Power BI. Estos son aplicaciones administrativas, pero también tenemos otro conjunto de aplicaciones a nivel de gobernanza. Aquí vamos a visualizar entonces aplicaciones para decidir qué flujos se archivan, pasan a un estado sin necesidad de eliminarlos, procesos de limpiar aplicaciones o archivar aplicaciones, donde se puedan también tener un conjunto de automatizaciones ya preconstruidas que facilitan el archivado, la limpieza, la depuración de automatizaciones basadas en Teams, automatizaciones de nube y sobre todo el sistema de aprobaciones. Para el fortalecimiento de los usuarios, el Centro de Excelencia tiene otro conjunto de aplicaciones donde se puede administrar el proceso de entrenamiento, el proceso de registro de las personas interesadas en tomar un entrenamiento y que esto venga acompañado por procesos de automatización como enviar recordatorios para el entrenamiento al que se registraron, confirmación de un registro y una encuesta de satisfacción. Pero también tenemos procesos de auditoría. Para ello están las aprobaciones para el despliegue de un entorno de Teams, las aprobaciones para el despliegue de una aplicación, de un flujo, de un chatbot y de un conector personalizado. ¿Por qué? Porque si tenemos usuarios que tienen licencia Enterprise, una persona con licencia Enterprise tiene derecho a construir un conector personalizado. Yo como administrador debería saber quién lo está haciendo para determinar eso en qué me impacta. Hay que mejorar el licenciamiento, hay que analizar los costos o hay que analizar si ese conector está permitido por términos de seguridad. Por lo tanto, tenemos un centro de compliance para los developers en Power Apps, una aplicación de Power Apps. Y lo que vimos en la cinta de opciones, en la aplicación de modelos, son dos Business Process Flow orientados a una justificación del negocio que responde a por qué tener dicha aplicación o proceso creado con el producto que elegí en Power Platform. Por ello tenemos un detalle del requerimiento para medir el cumplimiento y todo lo que tiene que ver con el proceso de aprobación en Teams. Tenemos un conjunto de archivos de auditoría, tenemos recursos a nivel de la construcción del catálogo. Todos estos elementos que están aquí abajo tienen que ver con lo que el implementador del centro de excelencia tiene que llegar a configurar, subir y activar. Yo en promedio me tomo en un cliente 15 días, una semana o 15 días máximo, implementando el centro de excelencia. Aquí analizamos entonces también un conjunto de aplicaciones para la implementación de buenas prácticas. El centro de excelencia nace como producto de un marco de trabajo llamado Power Platform Framework. También, desde aquí, cómo mantenemos actualizado nuestro COE a través de un administrador del ciclo de vida que se despliega desde GitHub. Pero, para finalizar, tenemos unos módulos independientes. Estos están orientados a la gobernanza y sobre todo al control del proceso creativo, de lo que los usuarios piden o quieren hacer con Power Platform. Y es el Innovation Backlog. Este es el resumen de cuál es la arquitectura de Power Platform para el centro de excelencia. Y decirles que así como estamos ahorita, ya con nuevas versiones del centro de excelencia holístico, donde tenemos todo lo que tiene que ver con Power Platform, yo participé en un grupo de prueba que se registra como MVP y participamos en una prueba de cómo implementar el próximo centro de excelencia, pero que está enfocado en la automatización. Este tiene una serie de prerequisitos, pero su entorno, su enfoque va orientado netamente a las automatizaciones basados en eh, flujos de interfaz de usuario o RPA. ¿Para qué? Para que al final los usuarios puedan entonces contar con una consola que les permita monitorear, pero sobre todo soportar, administrar y brindar correcciones, correctivos, soporte, además de la administración, de los flujos de trabajo basados en RPA. ¿De dónde nació esto? De, ya tenemos 2 años, 2 a 3 años con el Centro de Excelencia para Power Platform y nace del feedback de los clientes, aquellos clientes que están construyendo automatizaciones muy complejas basados en RPA y en inteligencia artificial. Por eso se han visto muchos cambios a nivel de derechos de uso de Power Platform. Vimos que bajó el precio de Virtual Legends, por ejemplo, que costaba $1,000 mensuales, ahora lo tenemos en $200. Hemos visto cómo se han incluido beneficios para los usuarios que pagan Power Automate per User Plan, donde ya se incluyen unos créditos para consumir en inteligencia artificial. Ya cuando hablamos de Layout Builder, sabemos que Layout Builder sí o sí hay que hablar de RPA o me va a llevar a hacer automatizaciones en RPA, pero también sabemos que una persona que trabaje con RPA sí o sí debería también incluir modelos de inteligencia artificial. Es decir, los dos son productos ahora complementarios y esto hizo que como fábrica Microsoft nos dispusiera próximamente de un centro de excelencia dedicado a todo el proceso de automatizaciones, pero específicamente va orientado más hacia los de RPA, flujos complejos, altos volúmenes de automatización. ¿Por qué? Porque si es una organización que está trabajando con Document Automation, es una organización que está trabajando con Process Advisor, entonces esta consola va a tener la capacidad de analizar lo que un Process Advisor procesa, analiza para cada usuario. Eso significa que la consola de administración para el COI de Automation no me va a descartar todos los flujos de nube. Por eso Microsoft sumó a los flujos de nube el monitor de supervisión de Process Advisor. Y todo esto va a converger y visualizarse en esta nueva consola de administración que sigue en vista previa y que hasta que tengamos el check podemos hacer una vista pública de cómo quedará ese nuevo centro de excelencia. Así que para todos ustedes me queda más que agradecerles la oportunidad. Me pasé 5 minutos de la presentación. No sé si tienen preguntas al respecto. Les voy a compartir en pantalla mis datos de contacto. Espero, vuelvo y les digo, que disfruten el resto del día y agradecerles a los organizadores la oportunidad que me dieron en participar, aun cuando no lo pude hacer de manera presencial. Así que, equipo que está en sitio, he terminado mi presentación. Veamos si en el chat hay preguntas. StreamYard, ¿dónde lo dejé? Aquí. Voy a dejarles aquí en el chat porque tengo algún proceso que me está consumiendo la máquina. Este es mi correo electrónico. Y en LinkedIn me pueden ubicar como Matville. Enrique, no sé si hay preguntas del público. alguien por allí?
Inventing the new world of business applications. A long time ago, in the ancient prehistoric days, the world of business applications was very different from how we know it today. To understand the great evolution of these applications, we must take a long journey, a journey back in time. Findings prove the presence of inchoate and degenerate off-the-shelf products, just as vast numbers of overcomplicated individual development. The modern developed business application was nowhere to be found, And then, out of the midst of chaos, 100% customized unique business solutions emerged that run on the robust Oriana low-code platform with no vendor deadlock. Based on a low-code foundation, by fine-tuning and snapping the application blocks together, business applications began to be built faster and at lower cost than ever before. The era of the Oriana ecosystem thus began. With a growing partner network across Europe, Oriana evolved from being a hands-on low-code, no-code tool to an enterprise-grade platform. A community of software developer, commercial, and ISV partners are relying now on the platform to distribute and develop scalable, future-proof solutions. With the help of the continuously growing Oriana content library, customizable applications can be created according to business needs and fine-tuned with the many ready-to-use application blocks. Oriana Studio, the integrated developer tool, doesn't even require in-depth coding knowledge, still enabling rapid application building and modification for consultants and developers alike. Customized prototypes are presented as soon as the first meeting. Ask for your own. Join Oriana's unique world.
Dicen que el aleteo de las alas de una mariposa se puede sentir al otro lado del mundo. Eso significa que algo que hagamos hoy puede tener consecuencias más allá de cualquier frontera, más allá del tiempo. Las personas con enfermedades raras o sin diagnóstico somos el paradigma del efecto mariposa. Pese a que las familias estamos lejos unas de otras, los retos que nos unen pesan más que cualquier distancia. Ese primer aleteo lo marcaron las personas que se unieron y crearon la primera organización de enfermedades raras de Europa. Gracias a este primer paso, surgieron los primeros marcos legislativos de enfermedades raras. La onda de este aleteo llegó a España, motivando después el nacimiento de FEDER, la Federación Española de Enfermedades Raras. Y con ello surgieron las primeras iniciativas para dar respuesta a las familias. También llegó la primera ponencia en el Senado que instaba a crear la Estrategia de Enfermedades Raras que llegaría en 2009. Una hoja de ruta que se publicó en paralelo a nuestro primer estudio en serio, que cuantificaba nuestros retos: diagnóstico, tratamiento y atención sociosanitaria. Los ecos volverían a resonar en Europa, con la creación de las redes europeas de referencia, siguiendo la Directiva de Asistencia Transfronteriza. Una vez habíamos sentado las bases de nuestra acción en Europa, desde nuestro país nos abrimos camino para volar, hacia Iberoamérica y todo el mundo. Por fin, ese primer aleteo, después de años, nos permitió llegar a la sede de la ONU en Nueva York. Y llegó hasta nuestros días, con la resolución de la ONU en enfermedades raras. ¿Y ahora qué? No podemos predecir el futuro, pero podemos ser ese aleteo, esa chispa que deriva en grandes cosas. ¿Os imagináis las buenas noticias que podríamos compartir en 2030?
Soñamos con un futuro en el que la inversión en investigación en enfermedades raras se multiplica. Se reduce el retraso diagnóstico a menos de un año. Existen tratamientos eficaces y seguros para la mayoría de las enfermedades raras. La experiencia clínica compartida ya es una realidad dentro y fuera de nuestras fronteras. Se consolida un modelo de atención integral, innovador, que cubre las necesidades sociosanitarias. Las personas con enfermedades raras logran un pleno desarrollo y participación social. Creemos que este futuro que imaginamos es posible.
morning. My name is Troy Taylor, and I'm going to present a session this morning on Power Platform connectors. Give me just a second. I'm not sure why. I'd like to thank the sponsors for having me. It's a pleasure to talk to people this early in the morning from where I am. My name is Troy Taylor. I'm a senior Power Platform consultant at Hitachi Solutions America. I'm based out of Pennsylvania, a state in the United States. I'm a business applications MVP for this year, a new MVP. And I'm a project coordinator for the Independent Publisher Connector Program, and I'm also a publisher. I've created approximately 80 connectors for the program. So those are certified connectors that are on the platform. And we'll talk more about those in a little bit. A little bit about myself. My wife and I just bought a home, what we call it in America, a homestead. It's a house with some acres. And if I'm not creating connectors and I'm not at work from home, obviously, I'm doing a little bit of farming. One day I will have sheep. So I always like to include pictures of sheep. All right, so we're going to have pretty tight presentation this morning. We're going to go over custom connectors and how they work in the Power Platform. I'm going to try to break the demo in half. We're going to both build a custom connector, and then we're going to also, hopefully, since that's the name of the subtitle of the presentation, is that we're going to submit it in the 50 minutes that we have. So I'm going to also discuss the Independent Publisher Connector Program and how you can also be a publisher and get your connector available to anyone on the Power Platform. And hopefully we'll have time for question and answer if possible. So what is a Power Platform connector? Power Platform connector, if you use Power Automate, chances are used a third-party connector that's not provided by Microsoft. Depending on what your position is, you may have also created your own custom connectors for your own projects. You might have created a custom connector for a client. You may have created a custom connector that's been sold as part of a solutions package. So the connectors are very flexible. They're all based off of a Swagger definition, which is OpenAPI 2.0. And for the Microsoft platform, they pretty much have to be based on a REST API. I'll put a little asterisk there. Not always, but usually. It allows whatever the third-party services to talk to Power Automate, Power Apps, and Logic Apps. Now, a connector can include actions and triggers. There can be other policies in the background that make the data transform a little bit. And new to connectors, you might also have custom code included in your connector so that you can use C# and do additional transformations, do additional service calls. There's lots of opportunities there. So here are on the left the three main connector types that you'll hear of. You'll hear of custom, certified, and independent publisher. I'm hoping this is not the first time you've heard of independent publisher, but by the end of the session, you'll definitely know what that type of connector is. I've pretty much gone over this. The difference mainly between a certified published connector for a third-party service and an independent publisher connector is that the certified connector is created by or for the service. So let's think about things like Dropbox or any of the main services that are in in the platform as connectors. And you'll see them published by the connector, by the service itself. Now, an independent publisher is where someone like me, okay, someone who doesn't own any API services, any public API services anyway, and I build a connector based off of their service, their API, their definition if they've provided one. I've built a connector that Microsoft will certify because it'll work with the service. Okay. So why use custom connectors over HTTP requests? Okay, so HTTP is certainly an action that you can use within Power Automate. So it's available. You certainly can do it. However, it can complicate things. So if you're using multiple HTTP requests within a single flow, or within a solution, you're going to have to be copying it, or using it multiple times. So it allows you to simplify the service and how you interact with it. Definitely reusability is a big thing, because you're only making the definition once, and then you're calling that custom connector or certified connector action again. So reusability is a big thing. You can certainly make definitions and determine which parameters are important, and there's a lot of things you can set up in the custom connector that allow for a lot of reusability. It avoids overhead. In Power Apps itself, you can't make direct HTTP calls, but you can make actions for custom connectors. So you can certainly make it available directly within Power Apps, rather than having Power Apps rely on a Power Automate to just make the call and return it. And connectors are also available for analytics through the Power Platform Admin Center. So that also is a reason to use it over HTTP. Okay, so what APIs can I create a connector to? Put an asterisk there. It is definitely any RESTful API. So these are public services, public APIs, Spotify, Yelp, NASA. I've built a couple connectors for NASA services. So, third-party services that are out there, and maybe don't have any exposure to Power Platform. So certainly want to bring those into the platform. And then also public APIs that you manage itself, whether it's based in Azure or, one of the other API service platforms. You certainly, even if it's public, you certainly can create a connector within Power Platform itself. And then private APIs, of course, whether that be a private API your company hosts in the cloud or on-prem, you can certainly create a custom connector for that. And keep in mind, private APIs, if you're dealing with clients, you can certainly package up custom connectors or make them available through the platform. There's certainly a custom connector does allow for authentication. So it's not like I'm creating a connector and I'm opening up all of the data that's in your service without any authentication. That's not what I'm saying. Authentication still works the same way for the service. So it's not like I'm turning a private API into a public API or using a connector. That's not what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm going to skip this slide. Sort of talked about reasons why an enterprise developer and partners and ISVs would use a custom connector. It's really about providing extensibility for your service and providing a definition for your platform. So that's certainly reasons to do it. All right, so for my demo today, see I'm doing great for time. We're going to be building a custom connector for a public API, http.garden. And I will try to talk quickly as we go through this. But yeah, so this is a public API. It doesn't make it clearly stated here, but this is just a get call to this one single endpoint, and it's a public API that provides it returns a picture for status codes. Your 200, your 400 codes. So they're shown as a gallery here, but it's just that's what the service does. It provides an image. So it's a great service just to test out what we're going to do for a custom connector. So yeah. So in this Power Automate, I've showed a successful HTTP call, to this service, and it's definitely a public service. There's no authentication here. It's returning a status code 200, even though I'm trying to get the 200 image. And you can see here it's just returning the file. So it's an object with two parameters, content type and the content. So that is what we're going to do right now. We're going to use this body to create a custom connector. Okay. Okay. So here I am. So this is one of my development environments. So that you'll see a lot of connectors here for connectors that I've already created. What we're going to do is we're just going to create it from blank. This service has not provided any sort of definition. This documentation is just about as minimalistic as possible for documentation of what's available through the service. So it's not like they provide an open API file. But what service you're building for, there's potentially that they would provide it to you as an open API file. And it's in preview right now, the availability to import from Open API 3.0, but you can definitely import Swagger, which is Open API 2.0. That's generally available now. So you have it from file, from URL. You can also import if the service has provided a Postman collection, so Postman 2.0 or 2.1. You can certainly import the definition from there. You can also import from GitHub, so any of the publicly available connectors that are in the repo you can import as well. But we're going to create from blank. And we're going to call this HTTP Garden. Oh, that's right. Can't create. It has a space. Okay. So we're going to be submitting this as independent publisher connector. So there's a background color that's already provided for that. You should give yourself your connector a description. We're going to copy the description that's here and fluff it up a little bit, just so that it's text is actually 2 words, and say it provides a image for each code. Okay, so what's important here, this is we're not connecting to an on-prem gateway. We are going to use HTTPS, which is required for the independent publisher connectors. We just need to get the host, which in this case it's the same as the website. So that makes it easy. We'll take out the rest of that now. So that's the host. There is no security that's required for this connector, so we're going to go ahead and create the connector just so that I don't forget to save. Get halfway through the demo and lose my work. So we're going to save real quick. Yeah, so this is the Power Automate editor. Yes, here we go. Okay. So yeah, we'll show there's no security. And then in terms of definition, I'm sure you've all seen or hopefully will look at this soon, but we're going to create an action and we're going to say get status. Let's call it get status code. We're going to give it a description, which is, it's not required, but you should always do. Retrieve a image based on requested. Okay, notice that this is sentence case description. It's a full sentence with a period. It's always important. And the operation is, we'll just call it status. Okay, we're going to use the import from sample. And it's that. Now, in this case, in the documentation that's provided, it's provided in this bracket. And so this parameter we want to be a required parameter. So we're going to use curly brackets around it. And code, I'm fine with that. And then it ends here with JPEG. But in the documentation, you can also see that there's 3 other file types that allows you to return. So we're going to make that parameter available as well. So we're going to call, we'll just call it file. Okay. So we're going to import. You can see now that the request has been defined. Both code and file are here as parameters. We're going to go ahead and fill out this information. If you don't fill it out now, you certainly can leave it like this while you're using it as a custom connector, not filling out the description or the summary. But yeah, you will need to fill those out for the independent publisher program. So we're going to fill out these now just so that we don't have to do it in code. Code number. And summary is uppercase as well. No period. And code, we're going to give a default of 200. And it is required. It's a in this case, these are all integers. So we're going to do, we're actually going to change this to integers. You could provide a dropdown, and we'll do this for the file type, but there's too many. It's a good service. There's too many codes that it returns to me, images that return. So that's too many for a dropdown. So we're not going to be able to do that. So that's code. That's the first parameter. And we're going to finish the description. File type. Call this file type. And JPEG is the default. And it is going to be a string. And we're going to do, we are going to do a drop down for this one. Okay, so let's get the other. Now notice I did leave the dot as part of the string. Well, I actually copied it. I didn't copy it. So we're only going to be doing the 3 letters in this case. Web, B, P. Not familiar with these other file formats, but which, since I'm talking from a Windows computer, they're probably Mac format, which is fine. People on Macs do use Power Automate as well. So yeah, so this is those values are there. So that's all we need to do. Okay, so so those are path parameters, as you can see in the URL. We don't have any query parameters. We're only returning a single image in this case. There's no additional headers that are needed. And because we're doing a get, there's no body. Now, for the independent publisher program, you do need to define a response. There. So we are going to find a 200 response, and because we've already run it in Power Automate, it's going to be the same response body. So we're going to copy that. All right, well, let's copy it. I'm not sure why my copy and paste isn't working in Brave this morning. Anyway, we're going to test this. We'll get the response. We'll bring it back. We have time. Okay, so we're going to update the connector before we can test it now. Let's get that action saved. Okay, so it's saved now. We're not going to provide any code. We're not going to transform it in any way. Now that we're in the test tab, you can see the operation that's available. There's no errors there. You can see the default types that we've provided. We're going to create a connection, or at least Azure is going to go out and make sure that it can connect to the service. Now we're going to test it. Okay, and here you go. You can see. Well, you can't see the image, obviously, but you can see that the response is 200, and here the body, it's trying to show the image, but I can't show the image. Let me just copy. I'm not sure why my copy isn't working this morning. Into code. Back to this. There we go. Working there. So we're going to go ahead and define this. Get this saved as well, because we will be downloading. To finish up the connector, we will need to. Oh, okay. I see it now. It was just that I was looking at the end of the file. All right. So that import is correct. We're going to define this as well. So in this case, the editor has put the title in the description, which is useful if you're just using it as a custom connector, but that's not what we're going to do. So we're going to rename this as content, and the file content, getting that right, and content type. And the content. Got those. We're going to save that, and we're going to let this work. We're going to go back, and I'm going to talk about. We're going to leave the demo here. So if this is all you were doing for your custom connector, if you weren't going to be submitting it for the program, it's certainly available now in flows. We won't refresh that window, but we'll just go ahead and edit it now so that you can see where it's available. So we're going to do a new step, go to the custom, probably down, doesn't like, hasn't refreshed. No, there it is. Lowercase letters, I don't know why in the custom list it always gets mixed up. But anyway, here it is. And you can see, it's virtually the same thing as an HTTP call, except it's very reusable now. It also allows you, to have the custom values already defined, so it certainly makes that a whole lot easier rather than having to document your HTTP step. So this is all good. We're going to save this and go back to the presentation now. Yes, so as I've been sort of alluding and talking about here in the background, the Independent Publisher Program is a Microsoft-sponsored open source project where Anyone can fork the repo and submit their own connector. There's folders within the repo that you can add your custom connectors to, and if you submit a pull request, Microsoft is going to certify them the exact same way that they certify their certified connectors directly from the third-party services. So it's a great open source project. It's a great way if you're an MVP, if you want to do contributions, open source contributions, it's great for that. But anyone can contribute to it. And an independent publisher, because of the nature of open source, usually isn't paid for their work. So just keep that in mind. I'm doing this as an open source contribution. I'm not getting paid directly by any of the services that I've built connectors for. I will say that working for Hitachi, some of these services have certainly been used in client projects, and I've gotten paid that way, but it's not, I'm not being paid by the service at all. So I'm not saying that you couldn't. The program is certainly flexible enough that you could potentially get paid, but that's not why I'm doing this. So as of this week, there's about 160 connectors in production today. So I'm sure you've seen, if you've looked in Power Automate, I'm sure, or you've looked on the documentation site for connectors, I'm sure you've seen all of these orange icons. It's not my favorite icon, but it's what it is. So it's two publishers, I guess, is what this is. And in the program today, so far, the program just started about a year ago. There's been over 50 additional publishers that have joined us. Not sure why I went. Yeah. So goals and benefits of the program, why you should contribute. I've sort of talked about this. It's gain visibility across Power Platform products. So maybe you've only, maybe you've used a connector in a Power App, okay? Your custom connector in a Power App. And, certainly you can contribute to the program, and it would be available in Logic Apps or Power Automate as well. It does allow you to share and collaborate on building custom connectors. Even though in the back end of a custom Microsoft Power Platform custom connector, even though it is, a Swagger definition, that's relatively formal, you could theoretically share that Swagger with other people. And I'm not saying that I haven't done that as well. But this certainly, because it's being put into an open source repo, it certainly brings a lot of visibility. It certainly allows, you to build a connector with maybe a handful of actions for the service, and someone else, you might have experience with different actions. And so they build out the actions that they know. So it's certainly sharing and collaborating is certainly an opportunity through this program. Like I said before, the connector that you submit will be validated and certified just the same way a certified connector is. So the same Microsoft engineers are going to look at your connector. They're going to verify that that it's working, that you've documented it well enough, so that it is good enough to be available in the platform. Like I said, it's an open source contribution, and you will receive Credly badges for it. Those are provided through, usually it's David Warner, I think, and it's usually through PnP. And you also have maintainer rights on your connector. So if at any time you want to stop supporting your connector, or the underlying API service changes, you certainly have your rights as the maintainer to remove it or make action to deprecate actions and make them not available. So that's certainly your right. You're right. So why should you believe me? When this is a project that I firmly believe in. It's not something that started last year, and I joined and was happy to be a contributor. This is something that I contribute to. I would say every week, at least once, usually. So yeah. So over the last year, I've built out 80 connectors or so. I sort of stop counting, kind of. I try to keep up with every 10 I try to up the number. But yeah, so some of these connectors are just like HTTP Garden. There's some of these are just a single action connector, but it provides good data for someone to get information. Over there on the right, that earthquake hazards from the U.S. Geological Survey. It's a single action connector. It didn't particularly take me that long to build. However, someone will use it, and that warms my heart a little bit. So, yeah. So in this case, you can see connectors that I've released. I've put awaiting release for a couple there that, the certification progress does take a couple weeks. So it's not like once I submit it, it's going to be available immediately. The engineers don't work that quick. So usually within 2 to 4 weeks, it's contributed, or it's released in the platform. You can also see here 3 connectors that I've contributed to that other people started, other publishers started, and I built off of or helped them with. So that's certainly a good part of the project. So yeah, so we have 20 minutes left. So I'm going to quickly go through the steps that you need to do to submit a custom connector. In this case, we've already done step 1. We've already built our custom connector. So that's certainly that's done. So we do in the repo, we do have a page for Top Connector Asks, and those have been collected over the year. Those are any service that anyone on GitHub has submitted, or that have told one of the coordinators that they want a connector build out for. Not saying that all of those are connectors that actually could be built, but that's a great place to start if you're looking for a service. But also think about services that you use. So there's all sorts of services. There's thousands of APIs out there, and certainly I am familiar with what appears to be a lot of them, but I certainly don't know either all of the services that are out there. So talking with friends, you're certainly going to hear of a service, and you'll be like, why doesn't that service have a connector yet? At least that's the way I think. So yeah, there's think about a custom connector for a service that you use. If it's something that you've used and you've already built a custom connector for, it certainly makes that process a little easier. Yeah. So you will need to prepare your artifacts. So to submit your connector to the repo, there are 3 files that you'll need to submit. 3 files, then plus some screenshots you'll add to the pull request. You will need to use the Power Platform Connector CLI, which not a lot of people know about. So you will need to download that, install it, and use that to download from your environment the custom connector you've built. And there'll be, and I'll show in a minute, there's additional metadata that you need to add that isn't part of the editor in any way. So there's additional steps that we're going to need to do. You need to make sure that you have summaries or titles and descriptions for all of your parameters, and your response schemas need to be defined as well. So I know that's a problem for some people, is that they have an API and it has a dynamic response schema, and so that'll be between whether you can submit it or not. If it's truly a 100% dynamic, you shouldn't submit that as a connector, because then it requires an end user to use parse JSON, and that's not what we're trying to provide. That's not no code. So we are trying to make publishers define their schemas. We're going to submit to GitHub. So this information, we're going to skip over this because I've sort of all talked about that. So like any pull requests on GitHub, it goes through the certification program. Engineers may leave you comments or things you need to fix, or whether they've certified it, in testing, whether they've certified it. So you will get comments on the pull request as it goes through each of the phases, and then you'll get an email saying your connector's been published and is available in production, meaning across the world, across all the regions. So yeah, and then you can show it off. You can share it on GitHub, and you can actually share the documentation. Like if your connector is published, it's going to be on the same Microsoft documentation site as every other connector. So you can certainly do that. There's the connector blog you can certainly get noticed on. I highly suggest if you want to do a demo, if you want to demo your service, the Microsoft PnP call monthly has a slot open for publishers just to show off the connector that they've built. And then we're also always looking for project coordinators. So we have people that have been on the project that have gone from third-party services, or not third-party, gone from consulting or working independently to now blue badge Microsoft employees. So we're always looking to get new coordinators as well. All right, so in the 10 minutes or so, we're going to submit this connector, I hope. Okay. So we're going to go out to command line. We're going to log into because we've already defined a lot of the information. This should be fairly quick. So it should, once we get this downloaded, it should be fairly quick. We're not going to have to do a lot of other editing. And yeah, number 9. I have no idea why it's in the middle of the list there. Download. So we, as part of one of the files that you have to make a README file. So I'm going to use this Swagger -markdown command line tool to definition. Can't type and talk this morning. We're going to use this command line tool to create a definition file for a README file in just a minute based on Markdown. So that's all I need to do there. We're going to go out, and you're going to see. So this is defined. This is downloaded now for me. All 5 files that are part of the custom connector. I'm going to create a folder, and we're going to call it HTTP. Let me rephrase that. I just created this markdown file, so it actually downloaded 4 files. We're going to go in here. We need to add the stack owner fields that you need. In this case, let's get up. It's this guy called Philae. Apparently, is some ex-Google engineer, so he is the owner of the service, but it would be the service name itself usually. So that is, so that's good. We don't need that anymore. Okay, so I've updated this file, so we're going to go and what my mouse is doing this morning. We're going to copy that in there so we know it's done. Okay, so this is the definition file that we created in the editor. There are some parameters we need to now add here. You need to add your contact information here, which I'm going to give there as my work email, and we're going to add the bottom of the file. There's some other metadata that's required, so we're going to see. It's just returning an image. And then the other thing I need to category is, we're just going to call it, I think the data category is the best one for that. But as you can see, all the titles and descriptions, those are all filled out. And yeah, I don't think there's any other things, but we're going to go and check it with a command line tool. So it is validate. I had to think for a second. API definition. Oh, I did miss something. Oh yeah, so these are path parameters. So we do need to add summary, and we've already added description, so we just need to add the summary name. Well, we're going to, no, oh, I've already added the summary, so it just needs this encoding. Needs add that. Try again. There we go. Validated successfully, so that's all we need to do for that file. We're going to open this file now. So I've already opened the README file, but my template one anyway. But yeah, so this the markdown swagger dash markdown tool has already created this file for me, so it's already documented the parameters and responses. But what the main information here that I love this tool for is that it provides the summary and description, and it's clearly there's additional lines, and it's really easy to see. So we're going to copy this so that it's documented correctly. We're going to call it, and we're going to change it. It should be lowercase as URL, but we're not going to do that. Publisher is correct, and then supported operations. That's what we need to add here. So we need to add get status code and a description as well. Save that, and then that file is, oh, I didn't save it in the right location. Sorry about that. Save as, since when you download the connector, it creates its own folder for it. So we're going to do it here. And then we're going to go and we're going to see, yes, all 3 files are there. We're going to go out, and actually I need to open a new window. I need to do it at Edge, because that's where I'm logged in completely. So this is my forked repo of the Power Platform connectors. So we're going to update the branch, get that up to date. We're going to create a branch within my fork, so that I can be working on other connectors while this is being certified. And we're just going to call this garden. Okay, so we're in the right branch. Okay, so these are all of the open source connectors that are in the independent publisher. They're all in their own folders. So we're going to do upload files. We're going to go back. Since I created it in a folder, we're just going to drag that in. It's going to create the 3 folders in my branch. We're going to contribute. Yes, it is 1 commit ahead because we've submitted the connector, and we're going to call it HTTP garden. It does require title to include independent publisher. There are a couple things here that we need to X to help the automatic tooling do its job. Oh, yeah, we forgot to do the screenshot, so let's go ahead and do that now as well. Yeah. So we already tested it, so we can get that screenshot real quick. Oh, I guess I didn't save it. All right. That's weird. Anyway, all right. So we need to test. Go. Interesting. Not sure why that happened. Must be something in the Azure service not working on a Saturday morning. Well, I can't take a screenshot. So this part of the demo will fail a little bit, but I've covered all the steps. So the only other thing that I need to do to submit this pull request is at the top of the file, I need to add some screenshots. I'll do it a later time. So yeah, but yeah, this would create the pull request and get that process started. I'll skip over that. I'm almost out of time anyway. So included it, I will, as part of the presentation, whenever it gets published, here are some links that I would highly suggest that you use to review or to, get your journey started. I would like to thank everyone who's viewing this morning, and here's my contact information. You certainly, you saw me on GitHub. You can certainly reach out to me. .com. I'm Troy S. Taylor on Twitter. I don't know why I added com. Let's copy that. I have a blog which I haven't been updating recently that you can certainly check out, or you can email me directly. And I would like to thank you, whoever this morning is viewing my session. I appreciate the support, and yeah. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak. We made under the 50-minute time limit, and if that connection reference was working this morning, we would have submitted the pull request. But yeah, hope you take this as a jumping point and think about, hopefully create a custom connector that you submit to the program. Okay, thank you.